What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Thursday show, gang. Happy Halloween to you too, Cujo. Good to see you here, buddy. Happy Halloween to everybody else out there as well. Always a fun day. I think we've got actually from, still last Halloween. God, that went quick. There is a, what's up, I'm a loser till I win the millie. If you look over my shoulder there, how the hell, there. I don't know if I still pointed to it from what you guys can see. The stupid mirror effect of doing these things. But if you look right here, I had built a little stretch of DVDs last year that were all Halloween oriented. A few other ones kind of mixed into the shelf back there. But some good Halloween fare if you're looking for a solid Halloween movie. First two Evil Deads are up there. Just watch two. You don't really need to watch one. Two's the better of the two, and it's basically a remake of one. The Thing, an all-time classic, John Carpenter. Halloween, an all-time classic, John Carpenter. Original Nightmare on Elm Street, all-time classic, Wes Craven. I think I've got Friday the 13th. What is that? 1, 2. It's 1, 2, the final chapter. And then Hellraiser and Sleepaway Camp are also in that pile. If you've never seen Sleepaway Camp, I highly recommend it if you're into movies that are so bad that they're fun and that you laugh your ass off the entire time. It's also got one of the all-time crazy endings. 80s horror movie. Some people might be familiar with it. If you remember back in the days of strolling through video stores, looking at all the box art and everything, there were 3 Sleepaway Camps. The first one's the only one you need to watch. The other 2 were just cheesy spin-offs. The first one's also cheesy. But the third one, the lead girl on the cover of the DVD, had nothing to do at all with the movie. But there's a famous cover where she's got she's got her backpack on at camp, and she's got Jason's hockey mask, Freddy's glove is hanging out of the bag. I forget what the nod to Mike Myers was, but there was something in there. But it was just like all the icons, and they just put it on their cover and got away with it, I guess. So it's kind of weird. But yeah, a little Halloween. Oh, there's some other ones on that next column over. The Fog is in there. Dead Snow. Dead Snow is fun. It's a Norwegian, I want to say. Norwegian zombie movie, and it's zombie Nazis. Can't go wrong with that. Me too, I'm a loser. Yeah, big horror movie fan. There's a bunch more in that pile, but that's just the ones that I had pulled out last year, so I figured I'd mention them now since I wanted to kill a couple minutes before the start of the show. Just a 4-gamer today. I was letting people trickle in. It was short notice again. Let me pull this up so you're not staring at my coffee dripping off my mustache. But yeah, just a 4-game slate. It's an interesting looking one. I had a little bit of time today. Right or wrong, today just feels like a slower paced day. We've got Tango Hotel says Showgirl's terrifying. Good one. Yeah, I love the Paul Verhoeven going back and saying like, well, it was meant to be a satire. Like, all right, I'll give you RoboCop. RoboCop is clearly a satire. Showgirls, I think, was just bad, and then he's falling back on like, I'm Paul Verhoeven. I'm able to say that my movies were all satirical. But yeah, that's definitely a terrifying flick. So yeah, had a little bit of time. I'm working on football stuff for the main slate in the background. Just need to spot check the projections. Basically, I've got everything lined up and updated. Projections for the showdown slate are up on the site. Projections for the hockey slate tonight are up on the site. And these projections that we're talking about right now, I just went in and threw another update up there. So that's all up to date as of a few minutes ago. And as I was saying, I had a little bit of time. So what I did was I actually optimized some lineups. I ran off 1,200 lineups for each site, and I put those into the Sims. So we'll take a look a little bit later on, because I do mention it a lot that you typically want to be doing that, not just let the Sim tool create the entire pool, because you will miss out on some well-constructed lineups if you just let that fly, because it's doing it in a more ignorant, just mash the lineup, mash the guys together, because it's got to create a full 50,000, 100,000, whatever number of entries that you're looking for. So you're getting the best out of that. It's better to layer in, hey, this is 1,000, this is 2,000, really, really good lineups. And you'll see when I pull up Basemine, there's some in there that are created from the sim, but there's a lot just right up at the top that are from the optimized group. Yeah, Rob Zombie, not a bad filmmaker as far as horror movies go. His Halloween remake was the first one was decent. I was a fan of the Danny McBride and Gordon Green Halloween reboots as well. The two of the three were good. First one, good, like really good. Second one, not bad. And then the third one, they completely tanked. I hated that last Halloween. I thought it was so bad. There is a new version of the Toxic Avenger coming out. Yeah. That was a USA Up All Night classic. Remember USA Up All Night, anybody? It was like Elvira hosted it. And then they just went like down the line of the large-breasted, like, you know, ditzy female blonde lady. Obviously, large-breasted and female usually go together, but usually. And it was just Toxic Avenger and just like all the schlocky, you know, exploitation flicks from the 70s and all the super cheesy D movie, B movie. Cujo remembers, Power looks like Power knows, I'm a loser knows. Love it. Leprechaun in the Hood was always a classic. The original Leprechaun, Jennifer Aniston's first role. I believe first role. Or first big feature movie, anyway. She was a brunette in that. Anyway, so we'll have some interesting lineups to look at the end of the show. We got a handful of people in here. 4 games on the board. Fortunately, the same slate across sites, although it doesn't look like KPJ came through the DraftKings sim for whatever reason. Probably have a naming issue with him. Doesn't look like he's going to be all that relevant. What was his... Take care of that right now. There he is. I think that gets him. Nope. Stats needed a 2. This is how you do the naming tables, by the way. For those that don't know. So what the function is basically saying is, it's telling it, hey, look up Kevin Porter. And he's not available in that. So it says, all right, if you can't find Kevin Porter, go to this, look up Kevin Porter from this column, and then count over X amount and find Kevin Porter Jr. and then look that up. That's how that works. If you're wondering, welcome to Excel class. So all right, good. He did go through the sim. He just wasn't coming up in the data there. So fantastic. Came through 0% of the time. Looks like that's below the field. Wasn't exactly a value play anyway. If KPJ pushing through means less Harden or none. No, I wouldn't think no Harden. Harden's right there. Harden's the number 2. Number 3 most important guy. Massive shares of some of these guys. Now that I'm looking. This is the first time I'm looking. I just got done running these sims, so I'm just seeing some of these results for myself. That is a monster share of Zubac. We're way above the field. Looks like he's probably our most differentiated player on DraftKings, and he landed in 87% of the top 150 on DK. That is crazy. Not crazy to, roster somebody that much. If the value's there, the value's there. But I just wasn't expecting him to come up quite that much. But, KPJ, I just mentioned KPJ. The only reason I was talking about him at all was because his numbers didn't come up on the DK. But you saw he didn't come through at all. So let's get into this a little bit. Vegas slate. 4 games. Bucks in the Grizz. Grizz missing a couple pieces. Marcus Smart got hurt last night. Bane got hurt last night. They didn't list either Ja or Triple J on the injury report at all, which absolutely shocked me. I was kind of thinking both those guys wouldn't play today on the second game of the back-to-back, but it looks like they're both in, both active. Conchar questionable again in that one. I think that's the only piece, right? Yeah, Conchar's questionable again, so Smart's out, Des Bane's out, G.G. Jackson's out, Luke Kennard is out, Vince Williams Jr. is out. And then on the other side, Giannis is probable. Seems all indications are that he's going to play. Chris Middleton still out in that one. and it's a 6.5 point total favoring, or 6.5 point spread rather, favoring the Bucks. 232 is our biggest total by a handful of points, solid 6-point differential. The Bucks, the highest implied total at 119 and change. Memphis on the other side, a 112 total. It is an appealing game. There's a lot of value pieces going to be on the board from the Memphis side. So definitely one to watch, and obviously star power on the Bucks side. Rockets and the Mavs, it's a 6.5 point spread the other way, favoring the home team, the hometown Mavs. 226.5 point total up top, 116.5 points implied total for the Mavs. Definitely, I mean, all these games are going to be in play, obviously, with only 4 games. We're taking pieces from everything. But there's high end on the Mavs, and then there are workable mid-range parts, I think, from both of those teams. We'll see how they simmed out, but I definitely think there's some appealing guys. There's some guys that come up for us a good amount of the time, so I'm sure we'll see some of that. San Antonio, Utah, Wemby, obviously a big piece of the puzzle. Markkanen is questionable on the Utah side, so we got to watch that injury status. That could be a key that would create even more value there with Utah. And there's still a lot of moving parts as far as Utah goes after the Hendricks injury. So one to watch there, and some guys that are probably mispriced for the time that they're going to play. Outside of Wemby on San Antonio, top of my mind, maybe Sohan. I doubt we get much Chris Paul, but maybe on a 4-gamer he hit the board a little harder than I'm expecting. Phoenix and LA to round things out, 4.5 points favoring the road Suns. 220.5 points on the board. I like the Harden play, obviously, as we were just saying. The Phoenix side, all 3 of their big guns, not crazy highly owned, not crazy highly projected. They're just kind of, they don't hit really their ceiling, their previous per minute ceilings on average with all 3 of those guys out there. Everybody's underperforming their previous per minute numbers. But as far as compares to the rest of the slate, I'm really curious to see how those 3 big guns ended up falling. Bradley Beal is questionable on this one, so that's the other one to watch. Those are just 4 questionables, and Giannis is probable. Other outs that I didn't mention, Dante Exum, Maxi Kleber, Taylor Hendricks, who I did mention, and Josh Okogie. And that's it. I'm a loser likes Amir Coffee at 3,200, 3,100. Let's see. Is he in here? We could bounce around. There he is, right there. 1.3 on FanDuel, but yeah, 3,100. He landed in 19.3% of the top 150. That does look like it's a little bit below the field, and you're dealing with a guy who so far this season has been a .44 per minute DraftKings player, and last year was just a .61 per minute player. So, just temper expectations, but it is a very, very cheap square. So it's just a building block. If he comes out and gives you 14 to 16 DraftKings points, he's buying you enough probably to put back those additional, 6-8 points that a better player in that role would have gotten you. So as long as your star is buying you that differential and then hitting his ceiling, you're doing well with that play. So he's definitely on the board on DraftKings, but it does look like he's going to be a little popular. It's probably around 25% ownership over there. Power saying, I don't see how Vegas has Milwaukee only favored by 6. Trap bet unless you're going for a win with negative CLV. Yeah, it might have changed in the last little bit. Double check it. But it's been hovering around that since this morning. Yep, 6.5 still. I mean, with Ja and Triple J out there, it does change. It's not as ugly as I was expecting it to be. And I think we would have seen some line movement if those guys weren't going to play, or we would have seen a different line if Vegas didn't expect those guys to play in the morning. I don't know. This early in the season, I don't love speculating on lines. Like we talked about the one the other day with the Nets and the Nuggets. And I was expecting the Nuggets to, kind of handle their business. And then I think it was you, Power, but it might have been Mamba or somebody who pointed out how close the line was. And I was like, oh, shit. And then that game went to overtime. So I don't love speculating on lines until I really, really know who the teams are and, what's going on. 6 and change is meaty enough. I mean, Oh, he's not terrible, Ricky. This is the worst inning of baseball I've ever seen in the 5-run inning, the 500 runs to cost them the World Series. But obviously, Aaron Judge is not terrible. That's just small sample happenstance as we talk about all through the baseball season. Things happen, comes and goes. It was one of the worst stretches of his entire career, but these things happen. And he mashed one into the seats yesterday. If that ball doesn't fall out of his glove, we'd all be singing a different tune today. Disappointing for sure, having that game in their pocket and then coughing it up in such a stupid way. Why the hell Volpe threw that ball to third base, I have no idea. You take the 2 outs there. You give up the run if you need to. It doesn't matter. What happened with Judge not catching that ball? No idea. Why Garrett Cole felt he couldn't reach first base to cover, or Anthony Rizzo felt he couldn't reach first base to get Mookie out. Couldn't tell you. But yeah, I mean, a small sample, anything can happen. I think most Yankee fans out there would probably not agree that Giancarlo Stanton is one of the best players of all time. And if you just look at his postseason stats, that's exactly what he is. So, again, we don't want to only go by postseason numbers. Stanton is a Hall of Famer, by the way. Anyway, disappointing. Disappointing ending to a good season, as Ricky's pointing out. The biggest thing to me, honestly, outside of the stupid inning, which is, again, I've never seen the baseball gods work that hard against the New York Yankees, ever. So it's just one of those things. Outside of that, what I really blame is they went into the postseason with a bullpen that was made up of retread starters. It was a bad bullpen that they were getting away with that Cashman didn't bother to upgrade. That was what cost them the World Series. Not having any kind of high leverage arm in that bullpen. Luke Weaver, come on. The best arm in that bullpen was Tommy Canley, who ended up giving up a couple runs last night or loading the bases or whatever in, I want to say, the 7th. But you can't go to the World Series with a bullpen like that. You get away with it throughout the regular season because you're playing the White Sox and the Angels. You don't get away with that against the Dodgers. So that's what I blame. I still like Cashman, but we definitely need some work on that bullpen, and we got to bring back Soto. I'm a loser. I saw that tweet. I think that's a repeat tweet from Gunn. I think that's something he does as a joke just to generate some engagements. I'm pretty sure he might have smashed a new one. I don't know, but I think that's old business. I think I've seen that from Gunn before. But yeah, imagining him just taking with his hands, just taking it by the end because he's that big and probably easily could do that. And swinging a full, flat screen TV just down and smashing it like a chair, like a steel chair in a wrestling match. That could be good. Ricky, if Soto's in a Mets jersey on opening day next year, there might not be a stream on opening day. It might be in morning. Let's take into this basketball slate before too much time goes by, huh? Let's start at center. Let's do it backward today. Just because Zubac has taken up so much of the center share. The big sacrifice there, obviously, right out of the gate is Wemby. We're not getting much Wemby at all on DraftKings. We got a big chunk of them on FanDuel. It looks like we're below the field at 11,000, but he's also got power forward on FanDuel. You can still get Wemby, obviously. It's not a binary one center decision on your DraftKings slate. So you could push up more Wemby, but it looks like the sim is clearly saying undercut to Wemby. 10-4 is a 1.30 per minute player so far this year, but he was a 1.71 per minute player last year. Usage has been down by 5-6 points so far this season. It's having its impact. We saw just last night, though, Karl Anthony Towns explode for the Knicks after we talked about how he had dipped from 26 down to 18% usage over the first couple of games. Wasn't really projecting great and went back out and finally looked like Karl Anthony Towns. Any given slate, regardless of what this is telling us, Wembanyama has that top end explosive 80 fantasy point upside, 100 fantasy point upside. One of the few guys in the entire league, let alone on any given slate, that has that true ceiling. So really no issues if you've got the salary and you want to grab a few additional shares of Wemby. Curious now what the field ownership that this ran against was. It's got to be, with it being that stark, it's probably high teens at least, if not in the 20s. Let's just see. Yep, I was right. High teens into the 20s kind of a range. So we're essentially 5 times less than the field. If you wanted to take this up to 10, 12% ownership, no issues with it. Again, with top-end players like that, there's no problem there. It's just going to reconfigure, your spend overall. It looks like for 10-7, Giannis is a better buy. We got to Giannis 20% of the time, still under the field. Giannis also has power forward eligibility, of course. At the pure center spot, though, it is all going in Zubac's direction. He's put up 1.26 per minute so far this year, 1.28 on the FanDuel scale. He's getting 22% usage, a little bit more to do for the Clips right now. Once they're back at full strength, that'll probably change, and it'll probably go back 16, 18% usage and be like a 1.07. But the 1.28, 1.26 for Zubac on additional usage is somewhat believable. He's a good player. He's carrying double digits across the board, 15.1% assist rate, nearly a 20% rebounding rate, 56.7% true shooting on the season. I have no issues if you want to say, all right, we got him 87% in the top 150 there, and that's aggressively ahead of the field. The field is, he is the top-owned projected center on DraftKings, though. He's offset at that position by about 11 points. So bear in mind, he's not 50% owned. So if you wanted to take this down from 87 just to gain shares of some of these other guys and play him at 60%, you're in the neighborhood of doubling the field at that range. So you can have a lot of Zubac and have a position against the field, not necessarily quite that aggressively, if that's your choice. But there's nothing wrong with taking this big position on Zubac either. On FanDuel, 56% as a center-only option. Among the center-only options on FanDuel, let's see. So it looks like some of the power forward eligible guys are working their way into the equation big time today as compared to what we saw. Well, actually, my math was off. That's 88.6% once we get them all in there. So it does mostly fall to the center-only guys. It's just 6. Yeah. So nobody else drawing more than 10%, and that's Danny Gafford after Zubac, who's drawing 56% and way above the field in the top 150 on FanDuel. $7,400 option over there. Worth going to. Did I put the wrong? Yeah, hold on one sec. I'm going to grab that. If you notice in the per game column there, it looks like when I copied it, it didn't take, and I put the, I repasted the totals in there. This will just take a half a sec. Per game. Again, grabbing all this stuff just directly from NBA.com is so convenient. Best dashboards out of any, stat dashboards out of any of the big sports. Come on. Except it's not letting me copy. There we go. So Zubac playing nearly 36 minutes a game. I've got him right on his average 35. He's playing 35.4. The other night he put up 30.9 FanDuel points in 31.2. That's the regular kind of output and definitely has ceiling for more. I've got him around this season's numbers because I expect the uptick in usage to continue. So I think it's a good spot on both sites. But again, on FanDuel too, if you want to spread a little bit more out for Danny Gafford, let's say, or Brook Lopez, or one of those guys. Şengün did not come up that much on FanDuel. He's been a little bit limited minutes-wise. He's kind of capping out around 30 minutes. It's got a little bit of an impact on his ceiling right now. Doesn't look like he was all that relevant on the DraftKings slate either. Let's pull it back out to the full DraftKings position, though. So nothing wrong with going to Brolo. We're at 0.92 FanDuel, 0.85 DraftKings. It's a little bit minor, 0.03 points per minute below what he was doing last year. He's actually seeing a little bit more usage so far this year. 4 games played, he's averaging 31.5 minutes. It's right where we've got him again today. He put up 38.2 on the FanDuel scale and 32 and change minutes the other day. He's got that upside to be an above 1 per minute fantasy player. Matchup against Memphis should be decent for him. He's only 5,500 on DraftKings, 61 on FanDuel. As a second center in, combining those two guys for a pretty cheap price at center and util is probably not a terrible approach on DraftKings, or using either one of those guys with Giannis at power forward center or util is also kind of an interesting approach. If you do that, pairing the two Milwaukee pieces might be more effective. You've also got a third Milwaukee piece looking pretty strong at the position in Bobby Portis. Portis projected at 25 minutes. It's a little bit ahead of his average. I'm sorry. Again, I keep looking at the wrong column. I've moved these things around. 25 minutes is his average. 19.3 is what he played the last time out. Put up just 10.2 FanDuel points. Portis is a guy who does have big time upside, though. Could be a little bit of a sneakier piece on this slate. On DraftKings, we didn't get him that much. We got him 19.3% of our top 150. That is below the field, though. Relative to the field, we're under. For 5,800 on FanDuel, we got him nearly 40% of lineups. His power forward and center there, I would expect that most of that falls into the power forward, especially given what we just saw with the center-only guys. So I'm confident that all of that falls into the power forward, but we do get him ahead of the field. 5.0 value score on FanDuel, under 5 on DraftKings. He's been a 0.96 per minute player this year, 0.99 on DraftKings, but last year a 1.11 player. Again, significant upside any given slate. We're back to that kind of territory with Bobby Portis. The best situations with Portis are when he steps into an additional handful of minutes, and we know that for a fact on the way in, and he's a little bit cheap for that opportunity. But the way he's priced, 5,800 on FanDuel, is perfectly fine. He's a good mid-range piece on a short slate. Let's see what his popularity is looking like over there. I've got it in the sheet there, but I don't want to, since again, it's not my ownership projection, I don't want to give it away. So we're a solid handful of points ahead of the field, as the angled green would indicate there. Not the darkest shading, but we're further ahead of the field on Bobby Portis than we are on Giannis at our 33%. It's a matter of a few points between the two as far as our differential from the field between the two. And again, both guys were a little bit below while still getting about 20% of both on the DraftKings slate. Danny Gafford's just cheap. 4,800, plays around 20 minutes a night. Got him projected for 20 minutes. The other night he put up 26.3 in 20 minutes. He's a low usage player, 16.2% this year. That's up from 14.5 last year. Putting up basically exactly the numbers he did last year, 1.25 per minute this year. This year, 1.24 last year. 45 on DraftKings. He's landing in 11% of our top 150. We're below the field on him on both, but he does look like a usable piece. It just looks like the field is using him a lot. So what that tells me is just it does make sense via the sim to maybe take your value square at a non-center spot on both sites. Have a little bit of Gafford across 150. If you're building 20, have a couple shares, but you don't need to get carried away with it. If you're building 20, max out at 2 shares. Again, Wemby, if you want to fire up FanDuel, take it up to 30%. Not a problem. It's just how it bounces off the price, the positioning, and all the other availability. So know that you're making a specific Wemby upside play and say, all right, this is the night on which I'm dedicating a portion of my lineups to the idea that Victor Wembanyama is an all-world basketball player. And you'll gain a little bit of upside, but know that those lineups still need differentiation because all you're doing is clawing your way back up toward where the field already is. So it's not a leverage play. It's not a differentiation play. If anything, you're getting more common by playing Wemby. Kessler, nothing really. Collins, nothing really. Again, Şengün didn't really come up. He is a good enough player that if you give him the upside of another few minutes, I'm in. I still like the player. He's at 119 this year. He was a 132 per minute player last year. So just a couple few points of usage, but nothing dramatic. 24-6 this year, 27 last year. Put up 37-9 in just 26 minutes the other day. So there is still clear ceiling to at least around his medians, but I mean, that's right around where he's projected for 30 minutes. Those are his 4 games. So last 2 have been really light. 32, 34. Going back over time. It's averaging him out under 30 so far. So just a little bit concerned about maybe an artificial cap, but in a tight game, there's no reason he doesn't play 34. So it is an upside piece to a degree. Jabari, 56, power forward only on FanDuel, but has center eligibility on DraftKings. Doesn't look like he came up at all over here. Looks like he's a somewhat interesting power forward piece on the FanDuel slate. None of this is in the center spot, I'm sure. We got him level with the field at about 10%. He's a .91 player this year, .91 player last year. Low usage, 15.2% usage rate. But anybody who's coming up around 10% with the idea of 30-plus minutes, 10% field, where we got him around the field, that is a point where there's potential differentiation there, right? The sim's telling us he's good enough to play right around the field. So if you grab a few additional shares to get above the field, again, you're making a specific, this is where I'm trying to gain a little bit of leverage choice. But to do that on guys who are owned at 10% by the field rather than guys who are owned at 35% by the field is in itself a leverage play. So I have no issues there. Jaren Jackson is similar. Triple J's got monster upside. If he's only going to be 8%, he came up at our 8% for us. If you wanted to double that to like 15, 16% to gain a little ground on the field, specifically on the Jaren Jackson play, that's a ceiling player. 1.34 per minute in his 3 games, 25 minutes a game this year. 41.8 in just 28.3 minutes the other day for 7,800 power forward center on FanDuel. DraftKings didn't get him at all. Well below the field. Again, if you wanted to take a few shares and even it out with the field for a player like that, it's a specific choice to make. He's going to be projected at single digits ownership on DraftKings. So it's easy to make that choice. If you don't want to go, the sim came up full fade on Triple J, which I don't really just in a vacuum like. I would love to say, hey, get me 10 lineups at least. Get me 15 lineups. Get me to 10% out of 150. And if I'm at 10, based on how it was simmed, I'm a couple lineups ahead of the field. So you don't need to do much to get out at least to the field on Triple J. And on a short slate, he is one of the few ceiling players. Granted, he is banged up. He's playing on the second night of a back-to-back. Same thing with Ja. I've only got him projected for 28 minutes, though. So, again, 41.8 in that exact same the other day. If he gives you that tonight, that's going to be tough to beat at some of these power forward center spots. Nurk doesn't really look relevant. 2% on FanDuel, nothing on DraftKings. 4% of Brandon Clark. Zach Edey didn't come up really at all. They didn't come up at all on DraftKings. Mix and match pieces at the absolute best with those guys. Both guys projected in the teens minutes-wise. Nothing else really popping out at the center position. Let's jump to forward since we're moving backward. Michael Nack, Lillard or Morant? Yeah, top of my head, we'll see. I'll jump to guard for you since you asked. I would assume Lillard. Yeah, there's Dame. Ja is down here. Ja really didn't land at all. I do have him limited at 30 minutes. So it is a play with, some ceiling on it if he is full go. But I also got some minutes going to Scotty. He didn't really land either. But yeah, pretty clearly it looks like Dame. Dame doesn't look like just on his own on either site. Doesn't look like a priority, though. 14%, like level with the field on FanDuel, a sub 5 value score. At an above 5 value score, we got him on DraftKings, 17%, but that is below the field. So it looks like he's a very good option as far as player in situation, but for where the field is, at price, at position, we did come up with less of him. Nothing wrong with playing him. He would be the choice in that head-to-head that you asked, though. I'm a loser saying thinks Durant goes supersonic mode tonight. I think that's a mean way to phrase that if you did it intentionally. Kevin Durant should have been a supersonic. Sonics are coming back, right? That's going to be one of the expansion teams. What are they doing that in 2 years? I don't think they've officially announced it yet, but you got to bring the Sonics back if you're going to expand, right? I know they want to do a Middle America team. They're considering Vegas. 25-26 season they're expanding. But they haven't announced yet. But got to be Seattle, man. I mean, come on. That was such a good market. They never should have lost that team. Coming out like his rookie year firing yet. So, yeah, let's see where he landed. He's not bad. He's in line 20 there. We got him significantly more on DraftKings than we did on FanDuel. Again, there is a little bit of just those 3 stars for Phoenix cannibalizing one another. Where it's easier to tell you from the other sheet. Last year, let's see. Actually, I can't do it all from the other sheet, unfortunately. Well, never mind. When all 3 guys are active, they chew into one another's ceilings a little bit in terms of the per minute numbers. But KD actually has been improved this year at 1.29 per minute. He was 1.23 last year. 1.29 on DK also. 28.7% usage, right around the same usage rate. KD is an absolute superstar, so he falls easily into that lane of you can get a little bit more of him on any given slate. He's only 8,600. He's power forward only on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you get the small forward eligibility still. He still didn't really come up, 2.6% below the field, but it looks like he's fairly low owned on FanDuel. You know, that below the field tells me he's probably 10-ish, somewhere in there. On DraftKings, it's the same kind of an angle, but we did get a bigger chunk of them, 14% of our top 150. Take a slice below the field, that probably puts him 20-25% in the field ownership. Oh, weird. So one of these is a gigantic undercut somehow? Or that shading is just... So based on our 2.6% and the number that I'm seeing, maybe it went up since I ran this. With Beal falling into questionable, maybe they changed something. This probably ran with a little bit lower of a number on him because this would be more stark red based on the number I'm seeing now. He's basically 10 times that owned on FanDuel right now in the projections. So, again, grabbing a little bit more of them, no problem. Getting yourself out to 20%, though, might run into a few too many competing lineups on the FanDuel slate. Definitely an upside player. 55.6 FanDuel points in 38.1 minutes the other day. He can still absolutely get it done. Playing against the Clips without having to worry about Kawhi. That'll do him some favors. So, yeah, I can get behind the Kevin Durant play on any given slate. Just in a raw, he is still one of the top players in the league sense. But he's not really standing out from these sim results. The top of the board, Jeremy Sohan. I mentioned him as the top of my head play. I had not seen these results at that point. But he's standing out pretty significantly, 70%. So we've got 2 real big pieces on DraftKings between him and Zubac. 70% of him and like 80% of Zubac. Based on how far ahead of the field that probably is, you can probably undercut that 70%. Again, if you want to spread things out a little bit more, just depends on your play style. If you want to ride the math directly, then you want to be probably that distant from the field. On FanDuel, 52% above the field, but the field is definitely high on him on the FanDuel slate. This is either the first or second highest owned player when this ran. And pretty juicy number, but we got ahead of it at 52. So like that, 5.13 value score. He's been a 1.12 per minute player, and he's jumped from 18.7% usage last year to 25.1 so far this year. It's a monster uptick in usage. It's a major uptick in output. So I think you just ride it till it bucks you at this point. He's only 63, 58 at power forward on both sites. Definitely go back to the well with Sohan. Can I put any more cliches into it? Normie Powell, 40% on FanDuel, 5,900 small forward shooting guard eligible. Same eligibility on DraftKings. Got him just about the same. 42%. We're basically level with the field. It looks like just about everybody's just going to have Norm Powell in 40 to 50% of their lineups, and everybody's not going to be all that excited about it. He's just kind of a mid-board fit. Solid 30-minute player. Not expensive. 1.12 per minute so far this year, 1.18 on the DraftKings scale, but this is a guy who was a 0.77 per minute player. He's seen a big uptick in usage too. 26.1% up from 19.3%. It's monstrous. They're really trying to cover a lot of ground out there in LA. That's why we're seeing Harden bouncing so high. Not a player I completely trust, but did give us 41 FanDuel points in 35 minutes the other day. And again, in some senses, it's just about how cheap can I buy 34, 35 minutes. And Norm Powell's an easy answer to that question today. PJ, I expected to see a little bit more of on FanDuel. Second time in a row, we didn't get a ton of PJ on FanDuel. Put up 34-1 in 32 minutes the last time out. Been a 0.94 per minute player so far this season. That one obviously got a little bit ahead of a 1.0. Just another cheap source of minutes. 58 on FanDuel, 48 on DraftKings. We got a ton of them. For 4,800, if you're buying 30-plus minutes from a guy who's been 0.90 this year and, again, was on FanDuel anyway, 0.87 last year, we got him 40% of the time. That's level with the field. Him and Norm Powell both level with the field. But definitely looks like an interesting piece. And those are two guys where you can buy 60-plus for 10-4. 60-plus minutes for 10,000 is not bad, considering that's less than Giannis costs on his own for his 35 minutes. Now, yeah, Giannis is giving you 1.44 per minute, while those guys are giving you a combined 1.04 if you average those two. But across 60 minutes, those catch up really quickly. Not saying that those two guys instead of Giannis, because you can just directly build those two guys in to support with value the Giannis play. But just as an interesting point of comparison, you can buy the extra minutes, lower rate, but from two players. Just an interesting way to look at the slate, in my opinion. Jalen Wells, presumably some minutes going to fall to him. 23 is projected. That's exactly what he played last time out. He's averaged 20.5 minutes over 5 games. 15.2 FanDuel points in the last outing. He's been a 0.88 per minute player so far on 20% usage. For only 39 on DraftKings, we got him 22% of the time, level with the field. 16% is a little bit ahead of the field, but the field might be catching up on it. Let's see. No, actually, field now in mid-single digits. So he's an interesting one now. At 38, all I really need is, even if we only go back to the 20 minutes. And again, there are definitely openings for Memphis. If he's going to be single digits and we landed on him 16% of the time, I'm happy to take him right around that. It's essentially double the field. You're not taking a huge shot, but you're getting a shot for differentiation on a guy who could become one of the key value pieces of the slate. That isn't bad. Opportunities like that pay off. So that's kind of interesting to me. On DraftKings, again, just with the field at 22% is perfectly fine. Field's a lot more into that play on DK. I wonder if it's the positioning, the shooting guard positioning. Small forward only on FanDuel, but basically the same value. Better value, actually, on FanDuel. 5.15 on the value score versus a 4.91 on DraftKings. Interesting. Amir Coffey, somebody mentioned at the beginning of the show, is liking. We already talked about Giannis and Portis a little bit, but both those guys obviously very much in play. We got big chunks of both those guys if you were not here for the center part of it a couple minutes ago. Coffey, my big concern with Coffey is the ridiculously low usage. It's the same 23 minutes, 3,800 small forward on FanDuel, and you can see the difference. We got him 1% of the time level with the field versus the 16% of the time that we got from Jay Wells, with a 5-point basically projection differentiation in the differential in the same 23 minutes. Because Amir Coffey is this year 0.43 points per minute, 0.44 DraftKings, 10.1% usage. He's got half the usage rate. And that's not an outlier. Last year it was 11.1, 0.61 per minute. He put up 9 FanDuel points in 26 and change minutes the other day. A lot of concerns about the Coffey play. He did come up again 19% of the time, but a little bit below the field for the 31. He is a much better looking piece of value on DraftKings at 31 than he is on FanDuel at 38. I would rather have Jay Wells. Beal, again, questionable, but definitely looks like a piece. 21.3% exposed on FanDuel, right with the field. On DraftKings, 16 and change, a little bit below. It's been a 0.95 player, 0.98. Out of the 3 guys, he's basically always going to be my candidate to be the lower end of the 3. And as we talked about a lot through last year when these 3 guys were healthy together, you do see a lot of days where it's like a 1, 2, and then the third guy a little bit of a step down. One guy up top, one guy solid, mid-type game, and then the third guy takes a haircut from where you would expect. And I expect that guy to be Beal more often than not. But he's not by any means a bad player. Again, the 0.98 is right on his 0.99 from last year. He has taken a little bit of a usage hit, 19.4 this year so far versus 22.4 last year. Probably levels off as the season goes on. Definitely a usable piece, but there looks like nothing special, just kind of an is who he is spot for Bradley Beal. Lauri Markkanen, also questionable. Definitely one to watch. Got him projected at 33 minutes. He's just 7,500 in both forward spots on FanDuel. He's a major piece on the FanDuel slate. We got him 57% of the time, and that's below the field's projected ownership, which is bonkers. Where was the field? Yeah, so against the field, that is a... This one adjusted too. All right, hold on. What did that run at? Now I need to see. $71. Yeah, so that was cut way down. I don't think he's going to be owned that highly. I think maybe we look at him more on the public ownership between, let's say, 40 and 50%. Somewhere in that territory. So we're probably more with the field on that one. Somebody might have fat-fingered something in that update that I used that went into the ownership on FanDuel because there's a couple quirky ones in there. I don't know how they got to 70% on Markkanen earlier. That was never going to be the case. But getting a big chunk of them regardless. The field number doesn't really impact. I mean, it impacts how much we get to them. But if anything, we would get more against lower ownership or around this and just aggressively. On DraftKings, just 15.3%. This looks more realistic. 7,800 over there at both forward spots. He's a cheaper proposition on the FanDuel slate. So far this season, we're just dealing with 0.84, but that comes on not really much difference as far as his usage goes. Just a little bit of happenstance in there so far for Markkanen. Feel like we could turn it around fairly quickly, assuming he plays. He's dealing with, I want to say, a back issue? Is that what it was for Lowry? Yeah, back issue. Because he's cheap. Why, Wells? Just because he's cheap. Even if you put him in a lower end, and he's been 0.88 per minute. He gets decent usage in his minutes. He's played about 20 minutes. So I've only given him 3 additional minutes or 2.5 additional minutes on top. Who didn't play the second half last game? I don't know who you're referring to, Steve. Was it Wells? In last night's game, it wasn't Wells. Wells played 23 last night. It's exactly what I gave him back. And again, they're down a Desmond Bane and a Marcus Smart. And potentially a Conchar. So if anything, I think there's a couple additional minutes. Just for everybody. But at worst, I see him doing, basically what he did last night. And he's low owned. And he's cheap. So more than anything else, like I was saying before, this is not ridiculously high exposure on a 4-game slate. And getting ahead of the field, with the field in single digits, that's basically doubling it on FanDuel. We're closer to where the field was, but we're a little bit ahead, I think, on DraftKings. With the field figure 18-20%. But just getting that cheap square, if you can do that as a differentiation piece, you're playing Jazz. That's exactly where you want to be. Right? Take your value free square guy as a player that not many people are getting that from. It gives you endless leverage over the slate. So I love a play that looks like that. He's no secret. I mean, again, there are people getting to him, and I think the ownership probably goes up or is higher than what was projected. It's probably more around this, but it's just a good value square with potential ceiling. Let's see, where were we? We talked Markkanen. Yeah, so if Markkanen doesn't go, obviously we're not playing him. But yeah, that it's just I hate back injuries for a basketball player. Anybody, if you've ever tweaked your back just from like sleeping weird. I was actually dealing with it just the other day. I could just feel it when I just moved a little bit. Even if it's something light, let alone playing in a goddamn NBA game as a big man, having to deal with Wemby, not gonna be good for him. I don't know that Steven Adams is getting more than like 15 minutes. You guys are talking about. If he plays at all, isn't he questionable? Yeah, Adams is also questionable. I don't know that we get much more than that out of than like 12, 15 out of Adams. And then if Markkanen doesn't go, it's just going to be kind of a value bonanza down the bench for some of these guys because everybody in that group is cheap. So just keep an eye on where the minutes go. But there'll be a few guys that hit the board pretty aggressively at that point. So if you're in that situation, 7 o'clock, the slate locks at 8. So if you're in that situation around 7 o'clock, keep an eye on, in my projections, just where the upside, where the raw projection numbers go. If you're looking at ownership from somebody else or minutes, just follow the minutes, follow the ownership in that situation. KD we talked about. Derek Jones, another just kind of a cheap square. 36% of them ahead of the field on FanDuel at 45, both forward spots. 13.3% on DraftKings and below the field for the 4,400. 0.73 this year, 0.74 last year, same exact 14.6% usage. This is exactly just a Derek Jones is who he is kind of a spot. But if you can grab a Derek Jones upside game with a little bit of edge against the fields, I don't know. I'm trying to polish it a little bit. It's nowhere near my favorite play, but he does math out pretty well on this slate. Is a 4.85 value score on FanDuel, 4.87 on DraftKings. Low end per minute guys with moderate usage are never the cornerstone of lineup building on these slates, but he does have a little bit of pop and he does fill positions cheap And I think that's how he's getting into these lineups. 27.6 in 32.7 minutes the other day. That's basically a ceiling game for this guy. Cody Williams, we saw step into the starting lineup the other day. He played 29.8, put up just 17 FanDuel points because he's a 0.51 per minute player on 9.7% usage so far. I expect him to stay there and get probably around the same 29 minutes. That's how I have him projected. He's super cheap at 3,900. He did land in FanDuel lineups at small forward 27% of the time. So it looks like a lot of FanDuel lineups might be doubling up some values, or they're just alternating those guys in the value spot. But you got the $3,900 there, the 38 there that we didn't get with Amir Coffey, and then the 38 there with Jalen Wells, who's coming up the second most out of the three. We actually got to more Cody Williams. But that's interesting that you can double up value at small forward. Curious to see when we pull up lineups how that actually came out. Williams on DraftKings, 12%. Level with the field for 41. Small forward only over there. Not a massive piece of value, just because he's kind of a little bit capped right now by what the output might actually look like. We'll have to see. But so far, it hasn't looked great. Taurean Prince, no value on FanDuel. We got him 12% of the time on DraftKings for 4,000. He does have a solid minutes projection, but he's another super low usage guy. 9.2% so far this year. That's down from 13.4 last year, but we're not chasing a 13% usage guy any more than we're chasing a 9% one. 0.53 this year, 0.64 last year on the FanDuel scale, 0.55 DraftKings, and that's while he's shooting 75% true shooting percentage. So, I mean, there is really, really thin value there. 10.3 FanDuel points in 31.9 minutes the other day. That's only double what Andrew Nembhard put up in 5 minutes last night. If you were in Discord last night around, 15 minutes after lock, like 4.5 minutes into that Pacers game, I specifically said, I already know that Andrew Nembhard's the guy who's going to kill my lineup. And right after that, he got a steal, picked up 3 additional FanDuel points, got him to 5 and within a minute of that, he was out of the game, never to be seen again. Dude played 5 minutes last night. Killed me. Ugh, hated that. I hated it because I knew when I chose that lineup to be the main lineup that I put into the bigger tournament, that was the spot. Like I said, that was the specific guy that I didn't like in that lineup. But he mathed out well. He wasn't going to be owned at all in that tournament. I hated it the minute I did it. And then it locked, and I was like, ooh, I wish I could have changed that. But in 30 and change minutes, whoever I was just talking about only doubled that score. Taurean Prince. We got 24% of Jake LaRavia. We got 10% of Conchar, who might not play. I got him at 22 minutes. He's another cheap piece at small forward. He could also see additional minutes if he does go. Probably has upside into the 28-minute range. 0.45 per minute so far this season on 6.9% usage. Last year, just a 9.6% usage rate, but at least he made something of it at 0.83 per minute. Low-end player in and out of the lineup all the time. Nothing to really get excited about. He's just another cheap square, and we've got a lot of very, very cheap small forward options on both sides. On DraftKings, at 38, 8.6%, the same share that we got of $3,200 Najee Marshall. Between the two, for similar points per minute, I would probably just take the $3,200 guy if I was desperate and going to a value square there. But really, at single digit, you're probably more focused just up here, and you've got a $3,100 option for that right there. Najee wasn't relevant on the FanDuel slate for 39. He's only projected at 17 minutes, right at his average. Played 16-2 the other day, put up 18.1 FanDuel points. He's been right about a point per minute, but he's another super low usage guy. He was a 0.85 per minute, so he's overperformed last year a little bit so far. Santi Aldama's solid. 6,000 on FanDuel. He didn't land great for value, but we get a little bit of him at power forward. 4.40 on the value square. It's been a 1.07 DraftKings, 1.05 per minute FanDuel player. Around the same usage as last year. It is an uptick by about 1/10 of a point per minute. But even his 0.93 is solid enough if you're just looking for a mid-range plug-and-play type. We only got him 4% on FanDuel, though, 6% on DraftKings. The DraftKings number's below the field. The FanDuel one's right around the field. If you wanted to level off on a player like that, it's fine. He's just a guy in the mid-range. He's not really a winner or a loser of slates. So Aldama's fine, but I would tend toward the sim number and undercut. If the field's at like 10, 12, I would undercut. Klay Thompson, 5.3 on FanDuel, 6.7. Another guy not really relevant. Undercut to the field on DraftKings at 5.7, shooting guard and small forward eligible. Klay's put up just 0.69 per minute so far this year. Reduced usage from last year in Golden State, 23.4% usage last year, down to 18.2 so far this year. 0.91 down to 0.69. On DraftKings, 0.74. Harrison Barnes, I can't really remember the last time I wanted to play Harrison Barnes. He comes up in lineup sometimes. Got to him 11% of the time and level with the field because he's just cheap. He's another cheap minutes filler building block type guy. Playing about 29 minutes a night. In 29.7 the other day, he put up 26.3 FanDuel points. Low usage, low output guy over the last couple of years. No love for the Harrison Barnes play. I think there's probably better ways to spend your money. The big differentiated piece across sites, Gary Trent. Massive share, 43%, but below the field on FanDuel in what ran. I think that's more right around the field where it is now. On DraftKings, we only got him like 5% of the time. It looks like a huge undercut over there, too. See where they're at now. What was I talking about? Oh, not the Clippers. Not Memphis either, Milwaukee. Nice clicking asshole. Yeah, so that is about a quarter of where the field is on DraftKings. He's not a runaway freight train of ownership over there, but he's definitely a popular enough mid-range play. 5,000 on DK at shooting guard and small forward. 4,800 is what's getting him a little bit more value. That's a more aggressively discounted price against the FanDuel cap. On 11.9% usage, which is very low usage so far this season. We've gotten 0.52 per minute on FanDuel, 0.52 per minute on DraftKings out of Gary Trent this season. He's down significantly. Losing 8 points of usage is going to have an impact on your output and your ceiling. I think he comes through fine as a value play on FanDuel. This might even be a little ahead of the field by now. But given the output, given the involvement, I really, really am skeptical about what the upside looks like until we see it. Again, he was a 0.80 per minute player last year. He's fine for value on the right slates. On a tight four-gamer with a lot of people seemingly going to him on FanDuel, I have no issues having him, but having a little bit of an undercut. On DraftKings, it's a more aggressive undercut. Over there, maybe you consider adding another 5% overall back on top and get him like 10% in your 150. Take him like half the field instead of like a quarter of the field. But he's been a low-end play so far. 21.1 FanDuel points in 37.4 minutes the other day. At 4,800, 21.1 is not paying the bills. Dylan Brooks, minor piece on both sides, 55.3 FanDuel, 4.6 DraftKings, at or about the field. And then the other differentiated piece, Amin Thompson. Just a 22-minute projection, cheap at both guard spots for 48. He's been a low-end producer so far. His 0.54, though, has come on 19.1% usage. That's a monster difference from somebody that's getting the low 11, 12, 13% usage that those other guys are. That's up 2 points from last year, and last year he put up 1.14 FanDuel points per minute. So there's a clear path to ceiling scores for a cheap player. And I mean ceiling for a 22-minute guy. I don't think he's going to go out there and put up 80 FanDuel points. But ceiling for that player in that role. At 53 on DraftKings, he's a point guard and a small forward, and we got him 1.3% of the time. If you wanted to level off with whatever the field's at, like 5%, no problem. Otherwise, 8% each of Jaren Jackson and Keldon Johnson. I have really no interest in Keldon Johnson. 18.4 just average usage. He's been a 0.75 per minute guy on that dip in usage, down from 0.95 last year. I think the team has just kind of moved on past Keldon Johnson at this point. Jaren Jackson, though, I do think is an upside play. Again, 1.34 per minute. We talked about this before. Got none of them over here, with the field getting a little bit of them. If you wanted to take some shares with an upside player like that, who just the other day put up 41.8 and 28.3, he's fairly priced to do that, 78.74. Those aren't particularly broken prices for a player with a realistic true ceiling. He's put up 1.34 on FanDuel, 1.30 on DraftKings this season. Jumping over to the guards. I'm going to actually sip this coffee that I've been holding. Jaws, neither a horror movie nor a Halloween movie. At best, you can argue it's a slasher movie. But Jaws should be watched around Memorial Day, not at Halloween. I mean, if you want to put it on, put it on. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. You can never go wrong with Jaws, but it's not a horror movie. Gets miscategorized. So Harden, top of the board. He came up at the beginning of the show. Looks great so far this year. I mean, on the usage alone, that's a 13 and change, 13.7% uptick in usage. 20.2 last year, up to 33.9. Obviously, things change when they're at full strength. But right now, looks like a great option. 9,400, he's getting back up to inflated price tags. 91 on FanDuel, but we still got a massively, nearly 50% on FanDuel, 58% on DraftKings. I think you can mash that pedal down. No problem with getting around 50% of lineups with Harden in it. Monster ceiling ability, 44 FanDuel points in 31.7 the other day. It's decent for your money still. A little bit more ceiling beyond that, though. Freddie VanVleet, a solid buy, 5.16 value score on FanDuel. Trails James Harden by a little bit, though. 5.39, same thing on DraftKings. Having those two players as the top-rated point-per-minute players, though, on both sites, easy to just go Harden, VanVleet, point guard on FanDuel, point guard on DraftKings. Same thing with those two players, especially priced where Freddie VanVleet is. For him to be 7,200, that's great. Played 41 minutes the other night, put up 34.1. It's not the best output so far this year, 0.90 per minute, but he's a clear 1.0 plus player. 1.06 last year on 19.4% usage. He's lost about 2 points of usage so far this year. Good facilitator. Looks like the shot hasn't really been falling. 36.8% of his threes, 9.5 takes a game. So you get him on the day that three's going down a little bit. We all have seen the Fred VanVleet ceiling before. Kyrie is a relatively big piece. 22% on FanDuel, but it looks like we gave a little bit of a haircut to the field at 8,100. 119 per minute this year on a little bit of a usage reduction. 27.4, 25% this year. It's probably just a matter of a few shots in 4 games. 4 games he's played, 35 minutes a night. We've got him in the 36 territory tonight. The other day, 49.3 FanDuel points in 39 minutes. There's upside even beyond that kind of a ceiling. We know he's a 50-plus point player. And he's affordable. 8,100 for Kyrie Irving, 75 on DraftKings. Both VanVleet and Kyrie Irving, you show those prices, 2 years ago? Even last year at times? Those are cheap. Powell we talked about already. Tyus Jones we're getting a little bit of on FanDuel, 11%, just kind of a field play. 6,000 over there at point guard only. 54 point guard only on DraftKings, though. Maybe we could talk a little bit. 30.6%. It's been a 0.88 per minute player so far this year. That's down a little from the 1.0 last year. It's on reduced usage by nearly 4 percentage points, 3.5. But still a 5.17 value score. Good facilitator with a 28.9% assist rate so far this season. Definitely can accrue some helpers playing alongside and at times in staggered units with the big three from Phoenix. Definitely a more interesting guy on the DraftKings slate, though, the way he lands. Just well under 5 is a value score on the FanDuel slate. Doesn't play nearly as well. Chris Dunn, just a mix and match piece on FanDuel at the absolute best, but on DraftKings for only 36. He's yet another super cheap guy on this 4-game slate. it's another guy in the 20 and change minutes range. He's averaged 21.4. I've got him at just 20. If you want to consider him a 18 to 22 minute range, it's probably correct. The other day he played 18. He put up 10 FanDuel points. Obviously not a great game. 0.95 per minute though, but it comes on just 10.8% usage so far in his 4 games. So it is yet another, and most of our cheap guys are just super low usage today. So as a good way to differentiate, I mentioned it before when I was talking about Jay Wells, and he's right here, so I'll say it again. If I can just take at the same price the guy who this season has doubled the usage of the other guys, regardless of what the per minute output has looked like, that will balance out over time. So I think that just as a cheat code, just kind of pay attention to the usage differentials between all of those super cheap guys, because most of those guys today are landing in this 10 to 12 range. And that is not a lot of shots. Jalen Green, solid is who he is day. 76, got him nearly 30% of the time on FanDuel, a little bit ahead of the field. I'd be happy to have him ahead of the field, especially if I don't have to get more than 30% exposed to get there. 30, 35. 1.20 so far this season on increased usage, 30% usage versus 27% last year. I don't know that he maintains a 0.18 point differential from what he put up per minute last season, but that's a solid little usage uptick for a lead banana in that offense. So nothing wrong with that. 58.3% true shooting so far this season, put up 14.7% assist rate, taking 11.5 threes a game in his 4 games. That's aggressive. Is that the biggest number on this board? I think it is. So if you're just looking for raw 3-point upside, how about a guy taking 11.5 a game and making 40+% of them? Jalen Green, not a bad option today. 77, we got him level with the field on DraftKings, and I tell you what, if the field's only in the 15-18% range, and you wanted to take him 25%, I think there's enough ceiling there. Field might not be caught up on what he's looked like so far, and what the situation has looked like so far. Dame, somebody asked about him head-to-head earlier. He looks fine. Just an is who he is day for Dame, 8,900, 15% on FanDuel, 17%, but below the field on DK where he's 8,800. That bounces off the salary cap a little differently. 123, 129 per minute so far this season, 29% usage is Dame Lillard. Superstar. No problem playing him even more aggressively than this on either side. If you want to take him back up toward the field on DraftKings, fine. You want to take him up slightly above the field on FanDuel, fine. You're not damaging yourself if you're doing that. Beal, we talked about among the forwards. Again, among the Phoenix guys, he tends to be my least favorite. Devin Booker's right here, 34.6%. He's also got small forward eligibility on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's just point guard, shooting guard. Lot more of Booker on the FanDuel slate. Level-ish with the field, but that's probably slightly ahead. Let's see, what's the most recent version of his? Michael Knack says Texans win comfortably. Jets are straight trash. Gotta watch who you call trash and garbage these days. Yeah, I think the Texans win this game. We'll be back, by the way, 6:30-ish. Keep an eye. Subscribe, by the way. Hit the notification so it pops up when I schedule the show in a little bit. Just got to get the dashboard updated, and then we'll be back on. But we're going to talk about the showdown slate a little bit later on. We'll run some Ace Mind Sims. We'll build some lineups. So check that out. Like this show. Subscribe so that you get that notification when that gets scheduled and when we go live. And check out rotoscouts.com. 3 sports live today. Unfortunately, the 4th sport ended last night. But if you subscribe today over at rotoscouts.com for under $1 per day, you get access to basketball, football, and hockey. Full projections for hockey with all the line combinations, power play updated daily. The only thing you got to keep an eye on is your starting goaltenders. Most of the time they're up for the afternoon, but sometimes we crash into lock before we get them. Basketball, full projections. Going to be adding some of these sim results very, very, very soon. Football, crazy deep stuff with the game notes. I write like 20,000 words about each main slate every weekend. Rankings, projections for every position, every player. Going to be doing a main slate show. It'll land soon tomorrow, maybe Saturday. We'll see where it pops up. But again, subscribe so that you get that. Also, check out acemind.io. That's our sim partners. That's where I run these sims that provide these results as far as the percentage exposures in our top 150. We'll look at the lineups in their tool in just a second. So stick around for that. But acemine.io, promo code RotoScouts, all in caps, 20% off your first month over there. That's enough of the business. What else we got? By the way, I've mentioned it a few times. All you guys who have subscribed so far, thank you. You're my favorite people. You guys absolutely rock. I had total faith that we would pick up some subscribers out of the gate with our crew of regulars who've been hanging with me for going on 2 years now. But the volume and the new people jumping in every day, I love it. It's really, really makes me feel good about the effort and makes me feel good about where I priced it and trying to provide like a real piece of value for people who are, it's great for 150 builders, but you don't have to be a 150 builder to use our product. And that's kind of my goal. I feel like there's a big, big gap in the industry where people who hand build, people who build 5, 10, 20 lineups don't really have a great price point at a lot of these sites. So hopefully that's coming through, but absolutely appreciate all you guys who are signing up. You guys rock. Downboard, Amin Thompson we talked about. Ja coming up just 10% of the time on FanDuel at 86. Limited on DraftKings. 9,000 over there, just got him 1.3% of the time. I've only got him projected at 30 minutes. He played 29-1 the other day, put up 35.1 FanDuel points, 1.27 on the nose for what he was doing last year, 32% usage. I mean, Ja is Ja. He's really only limited by the potential that he only plays about 30 minutes again. I think there is upside in a tough game against another high-end team or against a high-end team. I don't know if I should use the word another. The Grizz should be better, but it seems like for the last, 3 years, the Grizzlies have just been hurt. It's ridiculous at this point. But Ja obviously is one of the superstars on a 4-game slate. So if you wanted to hit the gas a little bit more than that, no, you're not hurting yourself too bad if you take him up to 5-8% on DraftKings, maybe even a little further. FanDuel, since we're 10% and level with the field, if you want to push the gas down a little bit on that one and take them up to 15, 18, somewhere in that territory, again, that's not problematic. It's just know that you might be walking into a bit of an artificial ceiling there if he doesn't play more than 30. Scotty priced up to 62 without expectation of starters minutes. I don't love it. 58 on DraftKings. I don't love it. He didn't really land. If we end up with a situation where he is starting, just filling in and picks up more minutes, then we get him a little bit, but the prices are going up because he's a good per minute contributor. 1.21 per minute so far this year. He was a 1.10 contributor last year. So he's reasonable, average-ish kind of usage. But now we're just not priced really effectively for the role that he's going to have. Even if he steps into a few additional minutes, we take him up to 30, he's only going to be an okay mid-range play. I would expect him more like 10% exposed in that situation. So it's really when he's a little bit cheaper stepping into starters minutes. That's not to say that if he plays 26, if he plays 30, he doesn't have a trajectory into the 40 FanDuel points. 50 is a ceiling, but the 40 kind of territory, the high 30s is still quite realistic. Amen, we talked about as an outlier. Chris Paul, wow. All right. Remember way back at the beginning of the show when we were talking about Vegas and I said, who knows? Maybe Chris Paul did get into some lineups. Chris Paul got into some lineups on FanDuel. He's only 5,400 over there. He put up 36.5 FanDuel points in 26.2 minutes the other day. Still capable of having Chris Paul days. So far this season, a 60.5% true shooting, a monstrous 39.2% assist rate. Shooting 47% from three. That's where that true shooting's coming from. Just 4.3 takes a game from three. He doesn't have much of a usage rate, 15% usage. It's not Chris Paul's game really to be shooting all the time. But with everything he does on the court, with the idea that he's going to be out there throwing helpers to Wemby in easy situations a lot of the time to pick up some cheap assists as they develop this connection. For cheap, I have no real qualms with going to a aggressive amount of Chris Paul on a 4-gamer. He came up 34.6% of the time, and that's level with the field. So what I would probably say is, given the nature of who the player is at this point in the career and the fact that we're not exactly exploding through the top of public ownership here, I would probably undercut this, maybe cut it down to 25, still have a chunk of a believable play, but maybe make the decision, take the angle to undercut the field on that a little bit, because it does look like he's a little bit popular on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it's not a problem because we didn't really get him. 5,900 over there is a different price point for him. Does look like he's owned a little bit by the field, so that's an aggressive undercut. We got one share of him in 150. But, can play, but not recommended. Stephon Castle, we got 18% of the time because he's super cheap, 4,000 point guard and shooting guard eligible. Just 0.61 on 18.6% usage. 20 minutes play the other day, he gave you 6.9 FanDuel points. So know that game is in play. If you roster him, probably not much beyond where he's projected in the mean. He's just cheap, so he's going to land in some lineups just as a function of the math, but doesn't really look like a key piece to me. On DraftKings, don't worry about it. He didn't come up. 2% Sexton, that's a good player to find down here, but very limited by minutes so far, just 22.8 minutes per night so far. So I've got him at 23, and if you're taking a 23-minute guy, we've got guys 2,000 cheaper projected right around the same. So Sexton really took a hit on this one. Everybody else did not come up. Is there anybody noteworthy down there? Doesn't really look like. Short slate. Even on a short slate, we really... some of these guys are pretty thin. If you wanted to dabble with guys, maybe a Terrence Mann with 20 and change is borderline. Maybe an Allen Connaughton kind of a guy. Maybe a Dinwiddie who's seen a little bit of an uptick in minutes. I wouldn't dip down much beyond guys who were projected at like 10. You're getting awfully thin, and you're getting awfully thin even as they bounce off these low salaries. These value scores are in the low 3s to 2s. Right? So there is no inherent value in these guys. These are guys who need something to happen really to really spike the upside. Ben Mathurin last night from the Pacers, for example, took advantage of Andrew Nembhard not playing the rest of the game and had a decent game. For a while, I thought he was just Nembhard wasn't playing because he was getting outplayed by Ben Mathurin, who was playing very, very well in that one. But it turns out Ben Mathurin dealing with a little bit of an injury. Andrew Nembhard. But that's the kind of situation you're looking at with somebody in the 16, 18-minute range. Would need something to happen and step into like 24 minutes to pay off those values. Trey, we talked about Tyus Jones. He is all the way up here. Way better on DK. 5,400. We got a lot of them. 30% and ahead of the field. So, yeah, no problem there. Just another player. He is a low usage player, but he's a decent facilitator. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. So I expect he's going to spike some decent assist days, and he's going to do a little bit better scoring. He was a 16.1% usage player last year, down at 12.6 so far this season. So even if he claws his way back into the 14-15 range, we'll have some better scoring days. But yeah, the way he's priced on DK at 54 point guard definitely looks like a piece. FanDuel a lot less so. 11%, just level with the field. Few additional shares, no problem. Few fewer shares, no problem. Let me pop Ace Mind up here. We'll take a look at what some of those lineups look like. And then we will punch out, and I'll prepare football. I'll get a basketball update in here. All right, so this is DraftKings. Just try to make it look a little bit better for you guys so you can actually read it. That look okay? So, fair amount of Zubac in the util or the center spot. Fair amount of Brolo, though, who was coming up a lot. Those were our two top-owned centers, and you can see they're basically just alternating shares down through the center spot, with some of them falling in the util here as well. I didn't say Luka's name during that entire breakdown. Where the hell was Luka? I skipped right over him. He was in the middle of the board. So real quick, Luka, obviously a superstar with monstrous slate winning upside on any given slate. 1.32 down from 1.64 so far this year, but plenty of opportunity to get his way back up to that level. 33.7% usage is still one of the highest usage players on the entire slate. That's down a little bit from 35.5 last year. At his 11.5 point guard only FanDuel, we got him 11% of the time, slightly below the field. At 11.2 point guard only on DraftKings, 4% of the time, slightly below the field. So that's an interesting piece. Another guy who you can just kind of take that angle of, I'm going to grab the sheer raw upside of Luka Doncic. and see what happens. And if you take a look at this third lineup, by the way, that's got Luka and Giannis in it. That's interesting. Projects out lower. You can see the projection offset by putting both those guys in and taking a bunch of low usage, low end value guys. But those are all the guys we talked about, right? Jay Wells, Norm Powell, Danny Gafford, Chris Dunn, Harrison Barnes, and then you get an upside player in Sohan at the end of it. But it's basically like a 2.5, 2-star, half a good player, and then 4 value guys or 5 value guys. It's an aggressive approach, but that lineup did sim out pretty well. It's bringing back $300 and change on the average in the DraftKings 15. Spends $49.9, so you can technically upgrade one of those spots by $100. That's an interesting construction, though. I mean, that is as starsy scrubsy as it gets. These other ones, a little bit more balanced than that one. Like this one goes with Tyus and Jay Wells in that first spot, Lowry, Giannis, Brolo. So again, remember I did mention potentially pairing those two guys, and it looks like that came up a fair amount of the time. So pairing the two big bucks. Norm Powell, Laravia, and then a Zubac share there. I like the Harden upside piece in this one. This one's definitely a more balanced approach. Harden, Sohan, the Zubac play, Freddie VanVleet, and Kyrie. Again, that pairing is dynamite. I like that a lot. And I'm glad we're seeing it a little bit. I think overall, most of these no, maybe not. These feel a little starsy scrubsy actually, because I'm just noticing this one's also got a Giannis and Luka. Giannis jaw. With all the value on the board, it feels like we're getting fairly starsy scrubsy in here. KD and Lillard with Brolo, Zubac. That one's not bad, actually. Lillard, Beal, value, Brolo, value, KD, and Zubac. It's reasonable. Got some good cashers in here. Average cash one. That top one brings back $400 on the average across 150,000 iterations of this slate. Oh, and then that's what I wanted to show. Remember when I said I put the optimized lineups in? Look at the impact that using optimized lineups has versus the ones that the field generates. It's right here, right? So that's why we always want to be making lineups and then simming with those lineups. It's just a time crunch on shows. A lot of the times I'm just showing the lineups that the sim built. But typically, lineups that come out of the optimizer, and there's an optimizer tool built in on AceMind at acemind.io, but you can run them on Cruncher, RG, wherever you build lineups. But build a pool of lineups. Drop it into your sim and use those. And then if generated lineups come out and look pretty good competitively, no problem with using those. That one right there, Zubac, Beal, Harden, Brolo, Sohan. Konchar's not playing, but we didn't get that news yet. Konchar questionable. Clay, Freddie VanVleet, reasonable enough. Maybe we swap out Konchar. Maybe we swap in like a Kyrie and get more value downboard that way. There's a lot of ways to build on DK, though. But again, the optimized lineups beat the generated lineups pretty handily. And this is just in the top 150. I ran 1,200 lineups against the 27,450 entry field. And you can see the percentage of those that landed in the top 150. I'll scroll down gently and give you guys some lineup building concepts. But again, I think one of the key takeaways is this Brolo Zubac play. I think the Brolo Giannis pairing is an interesting takeaway. And we saw that in our percentage exposures. The worst lineup in our top 150 is Kyrie, Norm Powell, Taurean Prince, Giannis, Zubac, Kente George, Cody Williams, and Sohan. That's a playable lineup. Bottom of the top 150. Again, when you're doing this, just because it's the top 150 and it's the bottom of the top 150 against 27,300 other lineups, That's still a very good lineup. So those are usable lineups down there. It doesn't mean they're not. But these are better. FanDuel slate. Dealing with probably similar as far as the, same deal. Optos greatly outperform the generated lineups. And again, that's just because of the way that it has to build the massive pool in a hurry. You're not going to get the best of the best lineups necessarily. You'll get a lot of decent lineups, but the best way to do it is to put well-constructed, optimized lineups in. And you can see they're beating the generated. It's probably closer to like 60-40 on FanDuel here. We do have a fair amount of generateds in here, but the top, it's more stark. Spend most of our salary on all those lineups, which is good, especially on a day where you're showing tons and tons of value. Although that is a way to differentiate on a short slate where there is a ton of value. If you use the value and still leave a sliver of salary on the table, you can differentiate because a lot of people will try and max out that last spot. Just as a little cheat code toward hand build differentiation. A lot of Jalen Wells coming up. A lot of Cody Williams coming up, and that's just eyeballing this off the top here. They're just alternating between these. And again, the idea of pairing the two $3,900 small forwards on FanDuel looks like it's happening here. I think Derek Jones was that price range. But cheap at small forward outside of these Lowry Markkanen shares looks like it's coming through fairly aggressively. This is Devin Booker sneaking in down here in number 20. But pretty aggressively discount at the small forward position on FanDuel today. Solid spread at center between the expected guys. Zubac, Brolo, Danny Gafford were, I believe, our three leaders in terms of the shares. And basically all the center-only guys. There was a Portis one, though. A couple snuck through. There was like 10% left over for power forward eligible players to land at center. But most of those guys, their shares landed at power forward. These look fairly star scrubs, considering that we're aggressively getting to the two discounts at small forward in most of these lineups. That's helping pay for on FanDuel as well. We get a Luka Giannis combo. That isn't a bad lineup. Luka, CP, Norm Powell, Trent, Clay, Jalen Wells, Giannis, Jabari Smith, and Brolo. Not bad. Jalen Green getting into this one. Remember, I like him as a interesting value piece or mid-range piece. Looks like aggressive spend at the point guard position on FanDuel. Our cheaper guys are the Chris Pauls, Tyus Jones type plays, but we're getting at least one star in basically all of these point guard spots. Shooting guard looks a little bit more mid, or like one and then pay up and a cheap. But, even Kyrie's not crazy expensive. Jalen Green, I like that pairing a lot in that top lineup. Small forward, again, aggressively discounted. Power forward is looking a lot like it's a one-on-one kind of a situation. And most of those are Giannis. And then center's just, a straight line through Zubac, Brolo, and Gafford. The top one on FanDuel bringing back 157 in the $15 buy. Obviously, aggressively different payout scales. But we'll give you some ideas. A lot of Harden. Markkanen status is definitely one to watch, considering how much he's coming up for us. Keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it's a lot of the straightforward stuff that we talked about. 4-game slate, we're only going to see so many surprises when we pull lineups. I do like the Booker's popping up a little bit. He's an interesting piece. Just the explosive upside from, if you consider all the stars on this slate and you just tell people, all right, name the stars from this group of teams. I'm not saying he's the last guy people would name, but he's not the first guy. So considering the ceiling on a player like that, what's his popularity? Sub 20% owned on FanDuel. And again, this is, per these guys' projections, which I go back and forth on. And I expect to kind of diminish in quality. Ooh, wow. How much did we get Booker on DK? Damn. We're like right with the field on Booker. We got him 7% of the time. That's technically like a point or two below the field. But for that spot, if you wanted to get a little bit more Booker, take him out to like 15. Just get double the field basically to claw a little bit of leverage with a super high upside player. Not bad. The usage is down a little, 26.1 so far this year, down from 28.9 last year. Again, they're just, trying to iron out the kinks and get the season rolling with a lot of mouths to feed there. Here's a 1.23 player that last year, though. He's down at 0.97 this year. So that's not just the difference of 2 points, 2 and change points of usage. A little bit of happenstance involved in that, too. So I think you continue as he gets cheaper. I think it makes a lot of sense to continue rolling those Booker dice a little bit. And since he's not highly owned, it's easy enough to just take double the field, and you're not really jamming yourself up across too many lineups if he has a clunker. And a lot of times, worst case, his clunker game is going to be an adequate game for a 4-game slate anyway, just on the raw scoring. As long as you're making it back up with some of the value guys we talked about, be all right. So taking Booker a little bit above the field on DraftKings, I think is fine. We got him a huge chunk on FanDuel. We got him 35% of the time. You should just get him naturally over there. And that's going to be probably a little ahead of the field. So I like that spot. It's interesting. Mamba's saying Norm Powell points. Center play, Zubac or the field. Yeah, we got a ton of Zubac, Mamba. But the way I was putting it was basically we got him like 80% of the time in the DraftKings sim, 45% on this FanDuel one. If you wanted to take him down with the field in the upper 40s or low 40s, if you wanted to take him down from like the 80% that he's coming up here and play him like 60% and spread out some shares, it's fine. It's just you're taking a reduced leverage position, but there's no real mistake in doing that. It's just it's a fully knowing chosen approach rather than a mistake necessarily, which is weird to say because it does directly defy the math. But hopefully what I'm trying to get across is coming across there. I know I'm not saying it quite right, but yeah, Zubac would be I think the easy go-to there. Michael knocks off to hand out some candy, and 5:40 on the clock here. Again, 6:30-ish, maybe 6:45. Come on back for a football showdown show. I'm going to get that stuff together right after I update this basketball slate, just make sure everything's taken care of projections-wise. We'll put the dashboard together. Going to run some sims on Ace Mind, and we'll be back to talk showdown football for a at least interesting Texans-Jets game. It's enough pieces anyway for a showdown slate. Should be fun. Come on back for that. Otherwise, good luck out there tonight in basketball. Somebody go win something. Tell me about it when you win something. I want to see those results. Makes me feel good if I'm not having a great night to see you guys winning. So let me know. But have a great night out there, guys, and we'll see you in just a little bit.